Conquest is the act of a single individual enforcing their will upon the world. Destiny is what drives the inner spirit of a human being to embark in transcontinental quests, overcoming psychological barriers and putting their flesh to the brutal toil of greatness. Alexander the Great conquered Asia for undying renown. Napoleon dominated Europe to spite the elite, and Timur swept through Central Asia to prove a bandit can become a conqueror. There are wise kings who fall to folly, and conquerors who lose imperial rule. What about the fools who become wise, and the weak who become strong? Cimon's youth was marked by embarrassment and reproach. His entire people and community thought that he wouldn't amount to nothing. It was said that he was prone to forming passionate entanglements with women. He also had a reputation for decadent behavior, heavy drinking, and for taking after his grandfather, whose nickname was Koalimos, which quite literally means simpleton or blockhead. His father was Miltiades, the Athenian general who decisively brought Hellenic victory against the Persian army in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. He enforced highly unorthodox methods of war when Greek forces were outnumbered by the Persians. Rather than waiting for Spartan reinforcements who were delayed, he convinced the Athenian military council to engage the Persians at once. He began by manipulating the Persian front by making the center of his lines thin while heavily developing his left and right flank. Foreseeing that the Persians would flood the center, Miltiades' flanks then swept in, concluding the battle by trapping and devastating the Persians. Despite his father's glory in battle, he brought himself and his family name to ruin after Marathon by taking the Athenians to a failed siege where he brutally injured and thus disabled himself, coming back to Athens totally empty-handed. His political enemies accused him of deceit and wasting funds. His prosecutors demanded the death penalty, but out of respect for his win in Marathon, the court spared him death but gave him a huge fine of 50 talents, which he could not afford. He was thus thrown in prison, where he died miserably and shamefully. Cimon was born 510 BCE, around the time democracy was first created. A contemporary of Cimon said he never had a decent education or any other liberal accomplishments which an ordinary Athenian possessed, and that he was also not clever nor eloquent, but he had a great noble spirit which resembled a Spartan and not an Athenian. Plutarch describes him, quoting Euripides, unadorned, forthright, and at its best in times of crisis. He proved himself a young man on the battlefield with bravery and intelligence, which caused his countrymen to long for him to carry out a glorious exploit on the battlefield. Cimon matched his father in strength, Themistocles in intelligence, but in statesmanship he surpassed them both. So where did the change start? How did the decadent youth turn into a man driven by power, virtue, and manliness? In 480 BCE, Xerxes, the Persian king, was marching a huge army towards Athens. Themistocles urged the people to abandon the city, board the naval fleet of Salamis, and fight the Persians at sea, which they thought was absurd because Athens only knew orthodox rules of war, which was horses, hoplites, and land. Meanwhile, Cimon was the first and only man to lead a procession of young men through the Acropolis, carrying his horse's bridle to offer up to Athena. After he dedicated it, he took a shield hanging in her temple, said a prayer, and went to sea. This spectacle alone caused many to take heart and board the fleet, swapping the bridle, symbolic for aristocratic power, for a shield, showed the aristocracy that one must tread the unknown to unravel triumph, and that luxury and comfort with norms are but burdens. At the Battle of Salamis, Cimon, with his imposing stature and physical strength, fought on the terrible front line of the boarding ships. He distinguished himself immediately among all, fighting with dreadful fury that captivated the entire fleet. Before the Battle of Salamis, they thought Cimon a simpleton, a blockhead, a drunk, and the son of a fool. After Salamis, he became an Athenian and Greek hero. Eventually, before people could even realize what was happening, Cimon had taken control of Greece and achieved it through reason and character. The Athenians grew in contempt of Themistocles' arrogant behavior, whereas they favored Cimon's honest character. Aristides, a powerful statesman, mentored Cimon and used him as a counter to Themistocles, his rival. Cimon arranged a powerful marriage with his sister and Callias, the richest man in Athens. This wealth completely eradicated his family's huge debt, allowing Cimon to run for legal and high offices. The constant threat of Persian conquest allowed Cimon to be promoted to the status of a general. He thus became indispensable. The Athenian assembly re-elected him as general every year for nearly 20 years. As Themistocles, the engineer of Athenian power, was exiled, Cimon then became head and supreme commander of what was called the Delian League. The Delian League was formed in 477 BCE. It was an alliance of many Greek polystates to resist the might of the Persian invasion and to thwart their efforts of conquest. What may have seemed as a mere alliance was rather only one power, which was Athens, and its desire was to eradicate the Persian Empire and then become the #1 hegemony in the Greek world, having dominion over their fellow brethren. In 477 BCE, the goal to drive away Persia from the Greek colonies in Asia Minor began. Cimon sailed to Eion in Thrace, which was a Persian stronghold. Bogas, a Persian governor, was told to surrender, but he refused. Cimon besieged Eion for a year until the food inside ran out, to which Bogas then killed his entire household, including himself. The Greeks captured the city and enslaved the entire population. Cimon then set forth towards Skyros. Skyros was controlled by Dolopians, who were pirates disrupting the trade across the Aegean Sea. They had robbed and kidnapped several merchants, who had then escaped and asked the Athenians for help. Cimon defeated the Dolopians and expelled the entire population from the island. He then colonized it with Athenians. To make the conquest look like a religious mission instead of an imperial land collection, he used propaganda. He claimed an oracle had told the Athenians to find the bones of the legendary Theseus, their founder, who was said to have died on Skyros. Cimon claimed he found a massive coffin with bones inside and brought it back to Athens in great triumph, which made the whole enterprise seem divinely ordained. Then Cimon set sail for Chersonese after he heard the inhabitants were calling for Persians to help protect them, since the rumors of Athenian conquests were spreading. In vengeance, Cimon took control of the region decisively and crushed the Persian resistance. Around this time was when Athenian imperialism was made manifest after the island Naxos tried to leave the Delian League. The Persians were being driven away, and Naxos felt no need to engage further in war. They valued their independence and didn't want to remain in the league. Cimon would not allow them to leave, and therefore besieged the island, tore down their city walls. Their navy was confiscated. They lost their vote in the league's council and were forced to pay higher taxes. Once a state joined the Delian League, the Athenians cunningly considered it a permanent membership. Attempting to leave the alliance was seen as treason. When Mytilene tried to leave, the Athenian assembly famously debated whether to annihilate the entire male population as a deterrent to other members of the league. After some time, the allies stopped providing men and ships as agreed to the terms from when they first joined the Delian League. They grew weary of war and felt no need to fight since the Battle of Plataea drove the Persians away from mainland Greece. They just wanted to be farmers in peace. The Athenian generals could have cared less and forced them into fulfilling their obligations. They punished them, prosecuted them, and soon made the authority of Athens a tyranny. Cimon done the opposite and accepted money or empty ships from everyone unwilling to serve abroad. He let the allies yield themselves to comfort until they lost all their military and warlike qualities. Instead, he made a large part of the Athenian population take turns in manning the ships, which made them hardened soldiers who no longer needed the numbers of their allies. The payments Cimon took made him a master of all who were allied to him. Cimon thus set forth with the Athenians towards their Ionian cousins in Asia Minor along the Greek colonies to persuade them into joining the league. Not all the Ionians were welcoming. Phasaelus denied Cimon entry, so Cimon in return besieged him, sacked their city, and annexed it into the league. The Persians were nearby at the Eurymedon River with a fleet commanded by Tithraustes and Pherendates. When the Persians saw the Greek fleet on the sea, they retreated into the river, but as they saw Cimon closing them in, the Persians came back out to sea to avoid being cornered. The battle began, and the Greeks broke the Persian line. The Persians fled to shore in panic for help from their army, but Cimon and the exhausted Greeks disembarked on land, which made the Persians' supplication for help utterly null and void. The Greeks completely routed them out, captured them, and destroyed their fleet. Cimon captured so much gold and silver from the Persian camp that he used it to build the Great South Wall of the Acropolis in Athens. Thousands of Persian soldiers were sold to slavery, which brought immense wealth to the Athenian economy. In his final moments, Cimon engages in the Battle of Citium in 450 BCE, in which he fell ill, likely from a wound or pestilence. On his deathbed, he ordered his men to keep his death a secret from the army. If the Greeks knew he was dead, they would lose heart and the Persians would take advantage. The Greeks fought Phoenician and Cilician ships serving the Persian Empire under the impression that their dead general is still giving orders, which ultimately resulted in victory. Cimon, who had spent 20 years destroying Persian fleets, died undefeated against the Persians. There is a famous quote attributed to Cimon: "Even in death, I conquered." Cimon began life as a fool and a decadent youth, but he later numbered his days and applied his heart to wisdom. As an architect of imperialism and Athenian dominance, all Cimon's actions were solely pan-Hellenic, whether his deeds be righteous or ruthless. Among the many men of Greek history who embodied manly excellence, Cimon surpasses most. Cimon's life shows us the power of will. If one can be thrown into the belly of hardship and the furnace of crisis, one can change to reach their true potential and fulfill their destiny.